ensure that because the regulations with TANF have now changed, so as people are falling off of TANF, that we are able to support them and get them trained and tooled so that they can be successful in the workplace. The next slide shows the percentage of individuals that receive food stamps. Again, in Ward 8, you're seeing over 35,000 individuals, 35,423 in Ward 8 that actually receive food stamps in the District of Columbia. The next slide shows the percent of female. This is something that's more relevant to us, and particularly the percent of female-headed families with children. Again, as you look at this, wards 5, 7, and 8 has the highest level of basically single mothers raising their children or fending for their families. And this is something that's very important to us. Let me show you the next slide, which is very interesting. So we collect some data. We also have data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics as well, and that's from the U.S. Department of Labor, that shows this strange trend here. And I've been asking people to explain it to me. Why is this actually happening? And what you're seeing here, which I think the third line, if you go down, which says whether or not you want a job, is you look at the age groups from 16 to 24, 25 to 54, and so on and so forth, women versus men. Women, which is highlighted right here, 88% of the women that were surveyed, or through not necessarily whether they're in school or they're receiving TANF and they cannot find employment, and other situations as well, 88% of those women do not want a job now. So that is an interesting statistic, and we need to work on that to figure out why this is seen as a barrier, why there's a challenge there, because we certainly have to get these women into the workplace. Let me talk a little bit about the employer picture in the District of Columbia. Just really quickly, I'll go through that. What you're seeing in the first slide is we need to look at the areas where we see the highest levels of pay. And in the District of Columbia, you're seeing jobs, for example, in banks that have seen between 2010 and 2015, you're seeing an increase in the pay. If you look at open-end investment funds, for example, that trend will fall. So we look at all of these things to try to figure out where are the highest paying jobs, where should we focus some of our individuals, because not all of the unemployed have low levels, have not received their GED, for example. We have many unemployed in the District of Columbia, including in wards 5, 7, and 8, that may even have a bachelor's or master's degree. We even have individuals that have PhD and a JD and are still chronically unemployed and finding it very difficult to connect into the workplace. So we try to look at all of these trends to try to figure out how we can move people and customize our interventions to ensure that they can be successful, particularly in some of these larger growing occupations and these highest paying industries. You can go to the next. Obviously, in the District of Columbia, the federal government has most of the jobs, and we have been struggling for years to get the federal government to hire us in the District of Columbia, because we have thousands of people that come into our city every day and then leave, and they work in the District of Columbia. They work in the District of Columbia, but they pay taxes elsewhere, and they live elsewhere. So what we're trying to do is figure out how we can penetrate the federal government. We increasingly see things like security and screening backgrounds and those types of things that are put in place to provide even more barriers to opportunities. And so we're trying to work with the federal agencies and with the Office of Personnel Management in particular to look at those challenges that they put in place and barriers to our residents, because not every job requires a secret clearance. There are different levels of jobs in the workplace. We look at the Department of Homeland Security and what they're doing in Ward 8, and everybody got really excited because they were coming. DHS was coming, Homeland Security was coming, and everybody thought, oh, we're going to get a whole bunch of jobs. Well, in fact, those are just people that are moving into Ward 8. We're providing the services, supporting services for them. So that doesn't necessarily impact those of us that are looking for employment when these types of opportunities come to the district. There are some economic and historic challenges that I just want to touch on briefly. We, as I mentioned before, we have some chronic unemployment in the District of Columbia. We have many individuals that have been unemployed for in excess of 4 years. They're no longer even in our system. They've been disengaged. They don't have a lot of hope. They don't even come to the Department of Employment Services for support. And it is really difficult for these individuals. They may be receiving support from some of our other district agencies, but not all. Many of them are disconnected from our system. But we also see a lot of growth in the District of Columbia. Many of the students that come in on an annual basis and attend, Catholic University or George Washington University, they don't leave, they stay here. So what's happening is it's changing our demographics and it's changing the population as well as the levels of educational attainment. You see you see many individuals that have a high level of educational attainment and many that have very low levels in one city. So this is a real disparate picture. So we need to make sure that we're always looking at those that really do not have those levels of educational attainment and how we can bring them up, as opposed to bringing jobs down to a lower level, because that doesn't necessarily produce a very effective strategy. At DOES, we noticed that we have some challenges. We go to, as I mentioned before, there are a lot of individuals that don't come to us for support because they may have come to one of our one-stop centers in the city and they were not necessarily helped. And so they just decide DOES is not a place where I can get support. We may have individuals that have high levels of educational attainment, and when they come in, they feel like, well, I don't need this. I can use my computer at home. Or I already know how to do that. I know how to prepare my resume. I don't need GED help, so they don't find the training as useful. But we have a lot of customized training now that we've put in place to help in other areas. So if you need a coach, for example, we're starting to look at coaching as a training tool. We're starting to look at the high demand occupations that are a little more that in IT and other areas where we can actually provide training. So we want to be able to serve all of those that come and not just necessarily target our efforts to one particular group. So we are seeing many changes in the Department of Employment Services. We have a lot of work to that we still need to do. And we welcome your feedback, your positive and negative, and we do get quite a bit of that. We're out in the community all the time because we want to make sure that we are being relevant to the challenges that individuals face during